Thank you very much for staying. This is the marketplace. Now, to our very first story, commercial banks in the country would from next month start using a new formula for interest rate calculation. The Ghana Revenue Reference Rate is already being described by industry watchers as revolutionary. This is because it is expected to deal with the age-old problem of lack of transparency in the determination of interest rates. The following report gives more details on the reference rates.
Sources say the introduction of this new formula has been influenced by challenges with the current module for interest rate calculations and attempts to move towards a more market-friendly and relevant structure. The Ghana reference rate, which will be influenced by current Treasury bills rate, the Bank of Ghana policy rate, interbank lending rates and inflation rates, will replace the current base rate setting for commercial banks. The new rates will be implemented from April 4 after what the Bank of Ghana is describing as extensive consultations with all the relevant players. It has also been structured in a way that will be reviewed every month and published by every commercial bank.
Meanwhile, the managing director of Barclays Bank, Patience Achanu, tells Joy Business this particular direction could deal with the current challenges facing interest rate determination in the country.
We've already responded to the call because there's a lot of progress in the lending rate space, and a lot of us, in line with the decline in policy rates, have dropped our lending rates by more than 6% since the beginning of last year. So we've already started responding favorably to the improving macroeconomic fundamentals.
So in the case of Barclays, what's the situation right now that if I should work to engage your credit officers and I'm not a prime or maybe a very credit-worthy person, what am I likely to get from your end?
So from 34%, which we started last year with, you can actually borrow from us at around 26 to 27%.
And the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC, is tasking local entrepreneurs and businesses in the country to take advantage of the ongoing exploration activities on the onshore Voltaian Basin. The call follows some concerns the country's upstream oil and gas sector is dominated by foreign multinationals. Deputy Communications Manager of the GNPC, Eric Podura, made a call when addressing the launch of the 6th Ghana Economic Outlook and Business Strategy Conference under the theme 10 Years of Oil and Gas, Challenges and Prospects.
A lot has happened in the industry, and we think that 10 years is enough time to have a discussion. And I'm particularly excited about the theme 10 years of oil and gas, challenges and prospects. After Jubilee, the 10th field came on board. Then the Sankofa field also came on stream. Sometime this year, gas will flow from the Sankofa field. Mr. Chairman, Dr. Chairman, announced that big players such as ExxonMobil have recently come in, and we are also leading an onshore operation. We call it the Voltaian Basin project. Now, the Voltaian Basin occupies about 40% of Ghana's landmass, and GNPC is leading some exploration efforts in this area. So the coming years are going to be very exciting, and I would like to see this conference discussing the opportunities that this brings to our local entrepreneurs. If we can't go into the main operations, which is very expensive. I was just discussing with Chairman before we came in that to drill offshore, when you hit a dry well, is $100 million. How many companies will be able in this country to get $100 million to invest in drilling just one well. But you see, there are service areas that we can also take advantage of. And for me, I think that this conference should look at those other areas. What are the low-hanging fruits that Ghanaian entrepreneurs can also be part of the operations in the oil and gas chain?
Let's now move on to one of our top stories for the day. And 7 workers of the Takwa Goldfields mines have been picked up by the police for taking part in a demonstration this morning against ongoing processes to lay them off. Last week, some workers were allegedly coerced to sign a redundancy list by armed military men and to sign their severance agreement letters. The exercise is set to have occurred despite a stay of execution by an Accra High Court. Let's now speak with the Deputy General Secretary of the Mine Workers Union, Abdul Moment Bana, to give us some more updates on the current development. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the marketplace.
Good afternoon, my brother.
Now, this morning we heard there were some gunshots and abuse by some armed military men as the workers protested. Can you confirm some workers have been picked up, and what is the current news?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I can confirm that yes, about 8 of our members were rounded up this morning. They were rounded up this morning and locked up in 3 cells. And as I speak to you now, they are still in there. About 5 also sustained some minor injuries on their heads and even on their hands. And so I can confirm that yes, that's actually what transpired.
Did any of these workers cause any distraction or did anything untoward for which they were arrested, or is just because they were demonstrating? Hello, Abdul.
Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to find out if any of these workers, the ones that have been apprehended, were causing any damage to the company's properties.
No, nobody was causing.
All right, now, is it the beginning of the massive strike threats that the union issued last week? Hello, Abdul.
Hello?
Yes, Abdul, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, so could this be the beginning of the massive strike that you issued last week nationwide?
Indeed, this is a prelude. This is a prelude to what we intend embarking on nationwide beginning tomorrow. And so what we just did is an indication of what is yet to come.
Now, has any more workers signed the redundancy list?
Now, as a matter of fact, as I speak to you now, I'm unable to confirm, but what I know is that more than 1,000 workers have signed on to the redundancy letters, strictly under duress. And so I do not know what numbers are going to come out in the days ahead.
And if you sign the redundancy list, what does it imply?
Well, you have an option to either sign the redundancy letter, or if you decide not to sign, you are thrown out of the mine. And so what it means is that if you sign the redundancy letter, then you are also compelled to sign a 1-month contract. Unfortunately, this 1-month contract, you do not even have a clue of what the terms and conditions of employment of that 1-month contract should be. And so you are in a total limbo as to what kind of terms and conditions cover you as a worker. And so it's a total confusion that we find ourselves at this stage.
All right, so now with some of your workers having signed this redundancy list, is it going to work positively for your cause?
Well, I must indicate that there are quite a number of things that ought to be done. Indeed, barely about 2-3 months ago, we have indicated to Goldfields, in accordance with the Labour Act, the need for us to get together and to negotiate 2018 pay adjustment. And that pay adjustment should certainly inform any likely redundancies that may occur. And so, as we speak now, that hasn't been done. And once that has not been done, certainly calculating the redundancy pay unilaterally I can't confirm whether or not the redundancy pay calculation has even been done correctly. And these are among some of the reasons why we have been trying to demonstrate to register our displeasure and our disappointment about the way this whole thing has been carried out.
All right, so finally, before you go, could this looming strike action, could it be your last resort, or you could do any other thing elsewhere?
Well, as an organization, as a union, we are amenable to any interventions that will bring about an amicable settlement of the issues. At the end of the day, any alternative dispute resolution mechanism, certainly that would bring about outcomes that are such, that will suffice the parties. It's something that we are committed to doing. But beyond that, we have lined up activities, and those activities certainly are ratified by the National Executive Council of our union. And so by our constitution, we are supposed to respect and go strictly by those lined up activities.
Many thanks for your time. Abdul Mumin Bana is the Deputy General Secretary of the Mine Workers Union. He's been confirming some arrests. Indeed, he says 7 members or 7 workers have currently been picked up by the police for demonstrating this morning against their rights. Now, moving on the marketplace, women in Africa have been entreated to remain consistent in their push towards progress, towards the effective roles of women in the country. The call was made at the Yield Leadership Forum here in Accra.
Serve as a platform for women to network with other women leaders in Africa. It brought together some women from the Yale African Women's Leaders Program, which serves as a network for African women in position, especially in governmental positions. Among panelists were former Minister of Education and former Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection in Ghana, Nana Opoku-Agyeman and Nana Oyelitha. One key area highlighted was the need for women to remain consistent in their push for progress.
It cannot be business as usual. We need to think outside the box. And I would dare say that women in Ghana, we should be more radical and demand for the change, a change that will ensure that women are in a better position, a change that will ensure that we have more women who are educated. Because
I need our young women, especially who are here today, to know that there are no limits. If there's any limit at all, it's your mindset. Many of Africa's young women are totally unencumbered. That's the truth.
That not every door that is closed is actually locked. And quite often doors are not, nobody can see if you are at the other side of that door. So whenever there is a door, knock, open it, because it is not locked. And if you get in there, don't get satisfied with whatever is there. Keep looking to see if there are inner rooms, if there are other doors, and keep looking for mentors. You can't do it alone. So young ladies, what do I advise you to do? The doors may be closed, but they are not locked.
Speaking to Joy Business, President of Yale University, Peter Salovey, expressed optimism over efforts being made worldwide to create the enabling environment for women to grow.
Here in Africa, I noticed that women have the same challenges they have in my country, right? There are the usual prejudices, there are the usual expectations, and they can hold women back. It almost seems like a global phenomenon. Having said that, we're seeing amazing changes right here before our eyes. This is clearly going to be the decade of women in leadership, especially in government, throughout the world, on the continent, in North America, and elsewhere.
The forum, which forms part of the Yale University's president's 6-day visit to Ghana, will be followed by a town hall on strengthening the education sector, which will be held on Tuesday, March 13. Reporting for Joy Business, Karen Doju.
Some of these things we have got to admit. For the
It's live on the marketplace. Now, MTN's quest to list on the Ghana Stock Exchange by June this year may be realized. This is because the regulator of the Capital and Securities Markets, SEC, has indicated it's working to approve the telecom operator prospectus soon. Now, George Rafi has been following up on this initial public offering and joins me right here in the studio, as usual, to give us some updates. Now, George, what has been happening with this whole issue?
So let's just a quick background on the development, and we understand that as part of this whole local content policy some of these firms operating in the telecom sector are being encouraged to kind of list on a local market in trying to see how Ghanaians can share in their fortunes. So it looks like MTN has taken the lead by doing this, and what they're trying to do is to list up to 30% of the business value on the Ghana Stock Exchange. Now, what we understand is that they have submitted the required documents to all the regulators, that's the Ghana Investment Promotion Center, the Securities and Exchange Commission, that is SEC, and try to get all the required approvals. Now, the plan is that if they're able to get all these approvals, then they could start that process of selling part of these shares to you and I through an entire process that we'll call the initial public offering by the end of this month. They are trying to raise at least about, or maybe about $620 million. Again, what we are picking up is that it could be more than that amount. And in terms of going forward, they want to be the first telco to do this and also to share in their fortunes by trying to flow these amount of shares onto the public.
Now, so why has it become necessary for the operator or the regulator, SEC, to send out these signals concerning this list? It's
about the commitment of MTN to this whole process. And if the numbers are right, it could be the biggest initial public offering that we've had in this country, even looking at that $620 million that they could be raising. So for a regulator of that market, what measures can you put in place to encourage this operator to quickly list? They understand that they've gotten a majority of the stuff that they are requiring them to do or trying to put in place. So they also want to fast track the process for them. Often when companies want to come onto the market, one of the major challenges after meeting the basic financial requirements is the regulator. And sometimes somebody will be planning to list on the market maybe in August. Due to certain concerns from the regulator, it delays and even run to the end of the year. Now you have a plan as well for the company, the amount of money you want to raise, invest into the business, or move on. So if the regulator is giving you an indication that if you meet all the checklists and you're prepared to also give you some concessions, it means that that plan that you're working with, end in March, start the IPO, possibly list on the market in June, that is right. And you know what businesses is about planning. It means that you can go ahead with that plan, raise the money, invest into the business, and expand.
So what else have you been picking up?
Well, what we understand is that, again, with the Ghana Stock Exchange, we also understand there have been some concession here again. It means that for this offer to be deemed as successful, because you're raising, if you're looking at about $620 million, that's a lot of money for this market, and looking at even the time frame. So even if this IPO starts ending March and it should end maybe in June, that period might be quite short. So you want to ensure that what would be the benchmark that you look at in terms of being deemed as successful. Now, we are picking up that if they're able to raise about 10% of this value, this initial public offering could be deemed as successful. So it means that they can go ahead and list on the Ghana Stock Exchange, even if they're unable to raise the entire amount during this period.
What will be the impact on the stock exchange and the economy as a whole?
More huge firms coming on board, it expands the capability or the capacity of the Ghana Stock Exchange. You have bigger companies on that. You have MTN, which consistently has been doing quite well in terms of profits, and you're going to share these profits with those who have bought into this business. Indirectly, some people have argued that what this will mean is that if you see yourself as a part owner of the business, then you also be committed in doing a lot of things for it to succeed. Because the more profits that they churn out, the more dividend that you get, if you're able to buy some of the MTN shares during the IPO, which I know you're going to do that.
I will,
because of the lots of money you have. I understand you budget about 10,000 Ghana cedis.
Please don't go
to
there
buy the shares. We can't wait for that one.
All right, that will be it. Thank you very much, George. We are bringing us updates on the decision by MTN to list on the stock exchange and the approval, which is expected to be given in June by the SEC. Now, away from that, the Food and Beverage Association of Ghana says players in the beverage industry are currently being left stranded at the Tema port following what it describes as the breakdown and inefficiency of the tax affixing machines there. Now, this tax affixing machine provided by government is aimed at affixing stamps on all cigarettes, hard liquor, and carbonated drinks imported into the country. Executive Secretary of the association, Samuel Agri, says the development at the Tema call for urgent action.
Some of the producers and importers directed their imports and then the local production to the tax affixing facility at Tema, the old Supply Commission warehouse to be precise. Now what is happening is that the product that has been sent there and the time consuming. If you have a 40-footer container that has to be affixed with stamps, then the challenge is that the time that they will use to affix the stamps will take you almost a day. Sometimes you are not able to get the whole container done, and therefore they have to carry it on to the next day.
And this is just a simple container? A
simple container, because let me use one of the products, like the carbonated drinks that comes in the cans. Last Friday, products were sent there. Yesterday, for instance, or let me say Saturday, when they started affixing the stamps, the whole day, only 40 containers, 40 cartons was able to be affixed with the stamps out of the 2,350 cartons. Now, each container of 40-footer gives you 2,350 cartons. So if a whole day or half day, you could use only the period to affix 40 cartons of those stamps, then it means that if you do your own calculation, what it means is that you need about 4 or 5 days to get one container done, or maybe more. So you ask yourself, all the numerous importers, if we should redirect our stocks there, and especially now that we don't, the local producers or the bottlers are not able to get the machines in place. And as law demands, we need to get the stamps affixed. So the position is that you take your production to that facility to get them affixed. If you look at the slow pace that they are using, then you ask yourself, if you have about 6 companies lined up over there with their production, what then will happen? It means that business will certainly slow down, monopoly in the market will also rise, competition is also a factor. And this is where we are saying that, look, if we deploy a simple technology, we could get this thing done almost immediately.
So you are advocating for this very machine to be kicked out of the system?
Exactly, it will not help. If you bring in about 5 or 10 cartons or 100 cartons, then obviously the only facility we can use is that one. If you want it in a very quick manner, then the only facility. But if you are bringing in containers, and you can just imagine if you have to go and queue up for the product to be affixed, you can just imagine what will happen. So, and the major concern now is the hygienic space that we have, because all the products that are coming in were packed under strict hygienic conditions, and therefore human contact was almost impossible. So now that we are having numerous hands in affixing, you can tell the kind of bacteria that will be transferred onto these products over.
That was Executive Secretary of the Food and Beverage Association, Samuel Agri, interacting with my colleague Charles Aite. And on that note, we draw the curtain down on this particular edition of the Marketplace. Many thanks for your company. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji. Have a good afternoon.